Good day, I am Kimberlyn Mayapso and today I'll be talking about sex education through lens of utilitarianism. Development is a natural course of nature as we learn to adapt towards a changing environment as an infant transitions into a child, teen, and adult. Both external and internal changes slowly start to appear. He begins to question more and explore more of himself, his body, trying to make more sense of the world around him. What is sex education? The question then becomes, how do we know what to do during sexual intercourse? How do we do it? And why do we do it? This is where sexual education comes in, where topic concerning sex and sexuality of man is tackled as part of the school curriculum. It covers a broad of range of topics which include, but is not limited to, human development, relationship, sexual health, and society and culture. The Council of Europe Convention and Protection of Children Against Sexual Exploitation and Sexual Abuse pushes for states to ensure that the risk of sexual exploitation and sexual abuse with the means of protection themselves adopted to their involving capacity is taught. This way, in a biological perspective, a well-informed individual would be confident and on matters concerning pregnancy and sexual transmitted infections such as HIV and AIDS. Research carried out in the Europe region recognized that for countries where mandatory sex education is not present, teenage birth pregnancy tends to be higher. And this is not only affects the health of teenage girls, but also seriously limits their education opportunities. Sex education in the Philippines is unfortunately not part of the K-12 curriculum. Current topic on sex education are only covered up to the biological level on the discussion of reproductive system, yet still does not go into great details as to what sexual intercourse is or how it is done. One of the reasons this can be attributed to it is being a Catholic country where premarital sex is considered a sin and therefore it's shunned upon the society. This has preparations on contraceptive uptake and family planning, which ultimately affects poverty rates as individuals are unable to support the children where they bring into the world, making a difficult life not only for themselves but also for those people around them. Catholic stance on sexual education in the Philippines. Unlike countries like Canada, Australia, abortion is prohibited in the Philippines. For whatever reason it may be, even if to save the mother's life, the act of abortion is considered to be a murderous act following the Catholic doctrine. With the urging of the Catholic Bishop Conference of the Philippines, the 1987 Constitution was adopted to recognize the responsibility of the government to protect the life of the unborn from conception. That being said, it has been very active in defiance during the beginning of the Reproductive Health Bill, which sought to push the sex education and permit to use of contraceptive. The environment surrounding sex in the Catholic country like the Philippines promotes abstinence-only sex education, which means that the only thing taught is to not have sex outside of marriage. It is not surprising to see that the opposite happens as people tend to be more curious as to what it is, thereby experimenting it out by psychology of limitation makes those outside of our constraints all the more desirable. Worldwide, abstinence-only education has seen no effect in decreasing HIV rates, sexual activity rates, or unplanned pregnancy rates, thereby proving it an ineffective strategy towards the curbing of this matrix. In Ott and Sandley's studies entitled Abstinence-Only Education, which sought to review the published literature on the topic, it came to the conclusion that abstinence-only policies violates the human rights of absolence and they withhold potentially life-saving information on HIV and other STIs. United Nations stands on sex education in the Philippines. In the United Nations report with the Philippines, compliance with the human rights obligation in the area of sexual and reproductive health and right, it mentions that abstinence birth rate are among the highest in the Philippines and surpasses that of its neighboring countries in the Asia Pacific. It has recognized negligence in the aspects of sexual and reproductive health, particularly in the failure of provide adequate access to sexual and reproductive health services in the area of the family planning and contraceptive services. Maternal health care, safe and legal abortion care, and removing existing barriers to sexual and reproductive care, particularly for absolents. Statistics on effect of state of sex education in the Philippines. While the onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic has greatly reduced the numbers of teenage pregnancy due to the movement restriction, it does not discount the fact that there are still instances of this happening. According to the Philippines Legislator Committee of the Population of Development, the birth by teenager age 15 and below increased from 1,119 in 2008 to 2,411 in 2019. Similarly, data from the Philippine Statistic Authority state that almost 500 babies are born every day to mothers aged 10 to 19. These children are still undergoing schooling and have not fully developed themselves, yet have to take on a very hard responsibility of taking care of another human, being possibly forfeiting their chance of earning for having their own life. The question I now ask is that there is a realization that sexual activities are being undertaken as data and laws are in place where little to no advancement has been made in the field of sex education. Are we simply choosing to disregard the consequences it brings as long as it is in line with our morals and belief? We do acknowledge that man needs to reproduce in the order to survive. Yet the implications that come with particularly the responsibilities and expenses for great time, money, resources, and opportunities are a tall order, especially for children who themselves are still navigating their way through the world, given that it is inherent that we arm people with knowledge to make informed sexual decisions as it ultimately affects the kind of life they live. Perspective of utilitarianism is a movement that has been picked up in the late 18th and 19th century as a way of thinking about morality. It urges that morality is not a matter of pleasing God, nor it is a matter of faithfulness, that abstract rules. This ties in largely with the argument on sex education, especially as morality in the lens of utilitarianism. Seek happiness as the end of state. It is a consequentialist belief where the ends justify the means. As long as the consequence brings the most good, then it is moral. In utilitarianism, we consider three key ideas: the principle of utility, the maximization, and the pleasure principle. First off, the principle of utility states that we ought to act so as to promote the greatness balance of the good or over evil. In application of the sex education dilemma, we are asked to choose between two choices: to be for it and prioritize the health of all as the ultimate goal would be to arm individual with the knowledge to make informed decision, or to be against it, to prioritize one's religion and belief as the ultimate goal would be to follow the teaching of the Bible and trust the God's plan for our life. If we look a bit deeper, it is a choice between the external and internal, or in more philosophical term, between a consequentialist or a deontological view. The latter where the focus is more on one's virtue, Their character as the means and the ends of achieving a certain goal are thought to be linked. Second, the maximization principle states that we ought to act so as to promote the greatest happiness for the greatest number. Without the use of the number or statistic, I would believe that the children would want to be happy being children instead of being faced with the responsibility of bringing up another individual as a consequence of the decision that they have made accidentally. Individual, we will continue competing for scarce resources, and would they not succeed in attaining them, they may end up further down to poverty line simply because of one moment of mistake which could have been prevented through comprehensive education. In medicine, a common saying is prevention is better than cure, and I believe this applies well to pregnancy and childbearing as well. Sex education is a prevention. Lastly, pleasure principle states that we ought to promote the greatness balance of pleasure over pain and the good in pleasure or happiness. Similar to what is stated earlier, a child deserves to experience life as a child. There is only a reason why the age of sexual consent is 16 years old. Those under the age are not old enough and experienced or have developed enough to know what they want to be, nor how to navigate through these big decisions which involve their body. Looking through its lens of rule of utilitarianism, if sexual education was adopted by the countries around the world, figuratively all would be more confident in themselves and able to access needed services such as contraceptive use, family planning, maternal health, and abortion. Pregnancy would be planned where individuals ensure that they are able to properly support the child that they bring into the world, that they are in a right physical, mental, emotional, and financial to do so, which it can turn pains to the future of the child. The result of this hands-on approach towards sex education proved effective as teens in the Netherlands do not have sex at an early age as opposed to their neighboring European countries, have a positive first sexual experience, are top user of birth control pills, and 9 out of 10 use contraceptive for their first sexual intercourse, according to CATS. Moreover, teenage pregnancy and STI rates in the Netherlands are one of the lowest worldwide, as Katz note in her article centering love, empowerment, and respect in sexuality education curriculum, rather than fear, shame, and stigma makes for a happier and healthier society. Sexual education is highly debated topic, especially at the current landscape in the Philippines, with its conservative view, promotes abstinence-only education where the act is to be avoided at all costs, except for marriage. However, what actually happens is the opposite. Strides towards yet education are still continuously hampered with the interest of the religion, even at the expense of safety, consent, and resources. In the utilitarian perspective, we recognize that there is a dilemma of and hence what is prioritized in bringing about most good and the most number of people. It is the line of belief, and sex education should be mandated into law as it arms a child with knowledge and skills to make informed sexual decision that centers around respect, intimacy, and safety, uplifting the lives of the people and giving them the confidence they need in navigating their development and growth journey. This empowers them in their present and future states, allowing them to make decisions to live a life that they are happy with. It is to note as well that the matter was only evaluated from a utilitarian point of view, and there are vast of majority perspectives out there, other being the Kantian view and Nicomachean view. These two views focus on the the deontological side, which gears more towards the characters of the individual, and maybe the view that the opposing side favors as the morals principles and attitude of the individual. It's of utmost importance.